Hello, tea timers. This is my nice cup of chai. Absolutely no caffeine in this. Nice and spicy. You should try some of that sometime. So I'm going to do a little bit more talking about portraits. So we talked about how the head is an oval shape and the eyes go about halfway down, and then the other features are all below that. So the one thing I want you to remember is that getting those in the right place is really important. The other thing is that your neck is actually almost as wide as the width of your head, and most people really don't realize that. And what they do is, when they're trying to do a portrait, they give somebody this really skinny neck and it looks a bit like a bobblehead. There is an artist called Modigliani that actually did portraits with thin necks. His paintings are rather charming. But anyway, that's one thing you want to remember, is that your neck is actually very thick. The other thing I would highly recommend is using a photograph when you first start doing portraits. And another thing is to do a side portrait rather than a head-on, because a head-on is much more difficult to get those eyes right in the right place and perfectly equal looking. Actually, your eyes aren't equal. Each eye is slightly different, but we think they're equal. So if you do a side portrait like this, it's much easier if you only have one eye showing. This picture here has another eye here, but you don't see the whole eye. It's much more forgiving to do a portrait that is just a side view. Now, if you're doing a portrait from a photograph, all artists use some kind of method to transfer that picture onto the paper that they're drawing. When I look at a picture, I'm not just looking at the features of the face. What we do is we're looking at how that face sits in the frame of that picture. So we're paying as much attention to these negative spaces around the face. And that's one of the differences between someone that is either a trained artist or has some kind of natural ability. And yes, there are people that have natural ability to draw and paint. The thing is, with most people, they don't know how they're doing it. But what they're doing is they're looking at where this image is sitting on the frame of the paper, as well as where every single feature sits within that as well. So one of the ways of giving yourself a way to transfer each of those pieces of the face onto the paper is to have what we call a baseline. And that is one part of the face that you use to measure with reference to the others. So the length of this eye here to here is how many times that makes the ear and the width of the face. So if you went to this eye, where this is just an index card, and you went from this point here to that point there, and you measured that, this is your baseline for all the other parts. So we can take that measurement there, and then we can go across the page and say that this width of this picture is 6 times that eye. And then you can use those measurements to see how long the nose is. So the nose from the top of the bridge showing here is about 1.5. I'm going to do it exactly. But that's how you would get an idea of, look, the lips here are almost exactly the same size as that eye. But if you looked at those, wouldn't you think just by looking that that was actually longer? Probably because you're pulling in that little part there as well. So go ahead and give yourself, get a picture. I would recommend a photograph out of a magazine or something, and an index card, and have some fun using that and trying to get an image onto a piece of paper of a portrait. I will see you next week.